V ďalšom rozhovore sa stretávame s Mykolom Bielieskovom, vojensko-bezpečnostným analytikom, ktorý stojí po boku Volodymyra Zelenského, je jeden z vedúcich pracovníkov v Národnom inštitúte a taktiež je jedným zo seniorných analytikov nadácie Comeback Live. Dobrého dňa, Mykola. Honestly, is Ukraine losing this war, or is Ukraine going to end it and win?
Well, different people can take this or that measurement and make different conclusions. So people who are pro-Ukrainian, they look at the front line. Front line is not moving in major fashion in Russian favor, and the Russians pay a steep price for their small incremental advances and losing a lot of equipment. Thus, people who are more pro-Ukrainian, they take these examples, this evidence, plus they take recent positive progress in Trump administration approach towards Russian-Ukrainian war, and they say that Russia can't win and Ukraine can deny Russia outright victory. And people who are against Ukraine, they take other measurement like difficulty of mobilizing people, difficulty of sustaining coalition, international one, which support Ukraine. Also, recent Chinese statement that China won't left Russia alone. So it's a quite interesting example that you can measure this war and you can interpret what we see in a different way. But what I'm sure and what is certain that with proper international aid given to Ukraine, Ukraine can deny Russia outright victory. So we can prevent a situation when Russia can dictate the terms of the settlement, like limiting Ukrainian sovereignty, like limiting Ukrainian armed forces number and quality, like forcing to accept territorial changes not favorable to Ukraine. So we can deny Russia outright victory despite all the problems and some negative tendencies.
Where does the Ukraine struggles the most? Is it recruiting or is it the military systems that you are missing?
Yeah, war of attrition, it's a war of degradation. So it negatively affects society in general and armed forces in particular. And yes, we have some problems, but these problems are more or less the same in both armed forces, like engaging people, quality of leadership. So that these are more or less the same problems and they expected problems. And partners can alleviate these problems with proper amount of aid, with better training. So we have problems, but it doesn't mean that these are unsurmountable obstacles that would undermine Ukraine in a short order of time.
President Zelensky recently signed the law, the controversial law. Intelligence, one of the representatives from the intelligence service, been let's say, criticized this move, and he said also that such a law is dividing the country inside. So, what would be your comment on this?
Everything that undermines unity and cohesion is unfortunately a negative thing, and it works in Russian favor, and thus we should be mindful of this problem. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Is Ukraine dedicated to resist 21 years, as the Russian delegation said recently also?
The better way to answer and better way to ask the question whether Russia is ready to fight war for 21 years. Because unlike Northern War, more than 300 years ago, this war is more resource intensive, human intensive, more damaging towards the country which is waging it. So it's a classic Russian bluff when they pretend that they are 10 feet tall. Unfortunately, it's a part of their posturing, it's a part of their campaign to undermine especially cohesion of our partners. But we shouldn't buy into it. And Russia, it's not a Russian empire. It's not even USSR, which both controlled Ukraine. Now they do not control Ukraine, and they can't use Ukrainian resources because Ukraine is independent state. So they are not able to wage this war for 21 years. It's just a mere bluff.
Yeah. Would you say is there the way that diplomacy could end this war, or it should be reached by definitive defeat of Russia Federation?
Right now it's very difficult to envision like a complete defeat of Russia. Unfortunately, our partners see differently the favorable end game. They think that if Ukraine managed to preserve itself, not necessarily recovering all temporary lost territories, but denying Russia an opportunity to dictate all the terms, it means victory. So if we are talking about defeat of Russia, definitely it's out of the question. But we can deny Russia victory. We can treat Russians quicker than they can regenerate, and by this deprive them ability to dictate the terms of the settlement. So realistically, we still can deny Russia outright victory. Russia is not 10 feet tall. They are losing, now they lost 1 million dead and wounded. It's unprecedented. And even Russia, with its disregard for human lives, can sustain this fight indefinitely. So they pretend that they can do this, but it's impossible for Russia as any other state, because indefinite war undermines the state from inside.
Is there some way we can see the Russia struggles, or it is sinking, losing the personnel, but they seems like they are keeping strong or so? Where we can see they are sinking?
Well, the fact that they don't want to call classic mobilization is a good sign that they also have constraints, they also have limits. And even authoritarian state, authoritarian regime can't risk another open mobilization. So they also struggling. They can for some time sustain this level of fighting, but they don't have indefinite capability to fight. Where are Russian limits? No one knows. But if Western partners sustain Ukraine into the next couple of years, Russia won't be able to sustain this level of fighting.
As you mentioned, the Western allies, if you are in the contact with them, do you see something like they are tired of supporting Ukraine because they see maybe trench war or not moving on the front lines? Is it somehow? Do you feel it?
Well, wars of attrition are always a challenge, because war of attrition is to a certain extent anathema to Western countries thanks to World War I, which is not popular. World War II is popular as a war of movement, like positional warfare, World War I. But I don't see broadly like this tiredness. Yes, we see some nuances in how countries approach Russian-Ukraine war. That most staunch supporters of Ukraine, these are Scandinavian states, these are Germany, these are Central and Eastern Europe, with some exceptions, unfortunately. This is France, this is UK. Yes, US to a certain extent repositioned itself, but even Trump doesn't want to lose profit out of selling weaponry. So we still see quite a solid commitment out of our partners, European one, especially Northern Europe, Western Europe, Central and Eastern Europe, Mediterranean basin to less extent for obvious reasons, but we see this quite a solid commitment and readiness to sustain Ukraine to the moment where Russia is not able to sustain this intensity of combat.
Could we say also the disinformations and Russian propaganda could damage this sentiment of supporting Ukraine in the Western countries? For example, in Slovakia, we struggle with the Russian propaganda and the disinformation, and it is also probably the reason why we are not sending or supporting as we began.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate development, because Slovakia was, I would say, among those who started to send very sophisticated equipment to Ukraine. Yes, it was mostly like Soviet or post-Soviet, but it was very sophisticated might equipment, and the way things evolved recently is very negative for bilateral relations, because we always were like neighbors with zero troubles, with zero problems in our bilateral relations, and we appreciate everything that was done in 2022, 2023. Yes, we see that Russians might not be as powerful and proficient in modern combined armed warfare, but they are very proficient at disinformation, of blaming Ukraine for all the problems, of using nuances of domestic politics of this or that country. and to put it against Ukraine. All we can do is just to make our case, don't get involved into emotional debates, and then people should debate and make decisions for themselves. Plus, if individual citizens want to support Ukraine, there are still other ways supporting different charities if they think that their government is not supporting Ukraine at the proper level. So there is a basis to work with. There are problems, and yes, Russian disinformation is much more powerful tool than Russian armed forces themselves.
Can you recall some example when Ukrainian strategic communication failed towards allies or towards its people?
I can't say about specific example. There are some differences of expectations because unfortunately we define our victory, or we tended to define our victory in 2022, 23, 24 in a bit different ways than our partners, even like most like staunch supporters of Ukraine. So this is a problem that we maybe have some different expectations. As I said, that we want to recover all the territories as quickly as possible. Our partners are more hesitant, more circumspect in this regard. But otherwise, I can say that there was a kind of like, epic failure. There was also differences in expectations with regard to NATO membership, because we want membership as quickly as possible, especially it was evident in 2023, to less extent 2024 summit. But this year we agreed that this summit is not about Ukraine-NATO, it's about NATO. If NATO is preserved and ready to support Ukraine, is valuable to Ukraine, so we limited our expectation, and you see that we learn from past tensions. But otherwise I can say that there was like some big crisis in terms of strategic communication. The major problem for Ukraine, major challenge is that people expect some new arguments why it's so important to support Ukraine, but the list of arguments is limited. It's not indefinite. There is just a limited amount of arguments why it's so critical to support Ukraine, and all of them are exhausted, but people expect something new, and this is a challenge in terms of strategic communications for Ukraine.
Once the Russia will be ready, do you think they have no problem or obstacles to attack NATO countries?
Well, militarily, definitely they're going to prepare. Whether or not they would dare to do this, it's open question. So it depends on a dynamic within NATO. To what extent Russia is certain that big countries would came or not to rescue like Baltic states, for instance, because they are the most vulnerable. They lack so-called strategic depths, unlike Finland, unlike Poland. So they're most vulnerable. So everything depends on the assessment Moscow is making. And for sure, when there is some tension, or when US is repositioning itself in a radical way in a short order of time, for sure it undermines deterrence. But I think with Trump in power and recent statements, attacking NATO country and testing Article 5 won't be an easy walk for Russia. Plus, in next 5-6 years, Central and Eastern Europe, Finland, Baltic states, Poland, Scandinavia, they would become more self-sufficient and less dependent on US. So if this window of opportunity is not exploited by Russia, then it would be even more difficult for them to do something grave and negative. But you shouldn't repeat Ukrainian mistake of not thinking about most negative scenarios. So you should always think about worst case scenario and not take your security and your safety for granted.
That could be one lesson which can Western countries learn from the Ukraine situation. What other lessons, or what most valuable lessons could we or the Western countries learn out of this situation?
Better to deter than to fight. Though to deter war, you need to be able to fight, you need to demonstrate this capability, thus you need to invest in your defense. So don't be shy to spend enough amount of money in your defense, because if deterrents fail, you would pay a couple of times more. So better to deter than to fight, and don't take for granted your security, and then invest as much as possible in building defensive capability right now and preserve unity of NATO, because unity is the most important thing, and do not allow your politicians, if they do something against this unity, to undermine NATO unity, because unity of NATO is the most valuable deterrent NATO has, along with specific military capabilities.
We are, the Slovak people are highly influenced by Russian propaganda and psychological operations. What would be your message to Slovaks under the influence?
You know, it's very easy to say that Czech facts do not trust the sources that try to smear Ukraine. But the best thing to do, just maybe take your chance and try to visit at least Western Ukraine and see that people are trying to live their life despite all the problems, challenges, that we are our trajectories are quite similar. I mean, history, that you were part of the Hungarian kingdom, we were part of Russian Empire. Our nationalist movement actually emerged in the same period of time, end of the 19th century. So the most important thing, that do not take for granted Ukrainian independence and the way you profited out of it, because after 1991 Russia doesn't exploit Ukrainian population, Ukrainian geography to threaten other countries. So that's it, and value friendship and good neighborly relations that we managed to build all along.
Mr. Bielieskov, thank you very much, you found the time for
Thanks
us.
for this opportunity.
Thank you. Tento rozhovor sme mohli nakrúcať aj vďaka podpore nadácie Otvorenej spoločnosti, za čo im sme veľmi vďační. Takisto sme vďační aj klubu lovcov Hoaxov, ktorých pravidelná podpora nám dopomohla k tomu, aby sme sa tu mohli zastaviť a šíriť fakty.